A lot of organizations say they want high performance teams, but very few can define what that actually means or how it's built. This is the people dividend. I'm Mike Horne. Today, I'm joined by Curtis Sprouse, founder and CEO of Eureka Connect, where he's worked with thousands of leaders and organizations to build and scale high performance teams. Curtis, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's nice to join you today on the podcast. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
That's great. You've worked with over 5,000 leaders across public and private companies.
Mhm.
When you step back from all of that, what's the pattern? What consistently separates teams that perform from teams that don't?
Well, I think in general, what we see is, and I always like to talk about, what I see and how I would define what I think are truly special leaders. I think there are a number of people out there that can put numbers up, quarterly numbers, revenue, profitability. They can drive an organization, but they're typically what I would call not sustainable leaders, meaning their companies will have fluctuations up and down. And you've been around a while and you've talked about some of the organizations you've been with over the years, and I'm sure you've seen that. What I find is the really great leaders, they create leaders. So if you looked at the lineage of people that have worked for them, and an example I gave, and probably I'm going to get some, I'll probably get some comments on this comment. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I'm a Steelers fan. And I think Mike Tomlin is a great coach.
Right.
If you look at the lineage of coaches that have come out of his organization, there aren't many. I don't think there are any other head coaches versus a guy like Belichick, right? And you look at the lineage of coaches that are around the league now that came out of his organization. I think that there are leaders that can put up the numbers. Tomlin has definitely put up the numbers, right? Has now losing season in over 20 years. But if you look at being a truly special leader that is able to, and Belichick has his flaws as a leader as well. I mean, we could talk about that. But he
Most
did,
leaders do.
yeah, but he did teach people how to lead. He taught them how to create a process, set expectations, to get rid of the components of the team that were unproductive or that were a drain on the team. And I think that if you look at the people that have gone through his organization, you see that. So I think the big thing is getting people to learn how do you create leaders within your organization, people that can define problems, take appropriate action, and be more efficient with regard to how they navigate the dynamic. I mean, we're seeing a more challenging environment now than we've ever seen in years of my career, at least.
So let's get that straight for our audience, Curtis. Are you saying that most organizations get it wrong? Is it in the talent pipeline, the leadership pipeline? Is it in leadership development? Is it in succession? Where do most organizations get it wrong?
I think that there's very little done, Mike, to develop leaders internally. I think most companies will strive to hire them, and they assume because they brought them in and they have pedigree that they're going to be great leaders. And I think the fatal flaw is, I work with some people right now that I've worked with for 20 years. They're good leaders, but when they step away from sort of self-assessing themselves and refining themselves, you see bad habits, right? And so it would be like if you and I, if you and I were professional tennis players and we never practiced. We just went out and tried to play on the weekends. You have to practice because, as we get older, you lose some speed. So now your game's got to change. You got to play with your head more than your legs. Opponents are stronger. They're faster. They have strengths and weaknesses. I'm not seeing companies really, I see people within companies really dedicated to developing leaders, but I don't see companies as a whole showing a dedication to building leadership.
Well, that's true. I mean, but I think if you'd ask a lot of executives, Curtis, do they have an intent to build a high performing team? But often, at least what I'm hearing you is that intention doesn't translate to outcome. So, for you and your experience, I mean, where does that gap show up most clearly?
You just said something I think is a really key distinction. In my mind, high performing isn't high functioning,
Right.
because big companies can get away with a lot of bad mistakes, right? If you're a big company, you can do a lot of things wrong And the law of big numbers, the numbers are coming in. If you've got a blockbuster drug, I mean, how many times have you seen blockbuster drugs carry companies for years and years and years, and they do all kinds of dumb, silly things, right? But what I find is we're able to help teams become high functioning. We just won a project a month ago with a venture fund, and we're working with a leadership team. They are all 30 years, most of them are 30 years plus of experience. I mean, they know their stuff and they're bright and they're talented, but we're finding all kinds of opportunity for every single person on that team where there are what I call leadership blind spots, things that they didn't quite understand how they're being detrimental to their ability to develop people around them or even work with their colleagues, and that they're not all high functioning. A great example, one of the leaders I was working with just this week, she is high energy, high dominance, high competing, high discipline. She is a thoroughbred, but her accommodation scores is 7. She's stubborn and she's intimidating. And so if you're on her team or one of her colleagues, you can have a hard time reading her or even understanding how to influence her thinking or open up her thinking. And she owned it. She said, "You're absolutely right. I don't have time for silliness. I don't have time." I said, "Yeah, but if you're talking to somebody that's at your level and they disagree with you, don't you think you should understand why they disagree? I mean, there's probably merit to why they have a different position than you do. And if all you're ever trying to do is win and control, then you miss an opportunity to maybe bridge a gap or develop your own thinking on the topic." And she gave me a couple examples. She said, "You're right. Happened this week." So those are the kinds of things. Is she a good, solid leader? Absolutely. Could she be better? Yes. Is it material? Absolutely.
I think I know her. I think she's one of my clients as well. Anyway, I think about what you said. I think back to my early experiences at Genentech when at one point the company had, I think it was 9 FDA approvals in a row. I mean, it created a very different dynamic in an organization that was, nearly out of business at one point in the early days. But what are leaders overestimating when they think their teams are performing at a high level? I mean, what are they overestimating?
I hired Mike. He's a bright guy. He has great experience. I shouldn't have to tell him what to do. Right. And what happens is you get more siloed um ELTs, right? You get people within the ELTs where, the R&D people aren't talking to the VP of sales and marketing. And there's just inefficiencies that exist then within that ELT where they're not elevating the company. You also get where people think by managing people, they're leading them. And that's another thing I find with great leaders. They don't manage people. They teach people how to think.
Good point.
They give people more responsibility to, look, if I'm going to bring Mike in, I'm going to trust that he knows how to define and solve problems. I've got a CEO right now where 2 of his top ELT members have tried to bring us in to develop critical people on the team, and he just won't pull the trigger on it. And the main reason they would like me to come in and help is to help the CEO. And the one person I've worked with him for 20 years, he's like, "This CEO does some things really well, but some things are just, they're almost remedial with regard to how he approaches them." And one of them is trusting people that he has working for him that have been in the game for 30 years, right? That's,
It,
go
it's
ahead.
changing too, isn't it? I mean, with the advances in AI, I think about a lot of the people that with whom I work and with whom I have worked are often the smartest people, in the room. They're the smartest people at the table. And, now that knowledge becomes more ubiquitous or certainly more accessible in some ways, or certain types of knowledge, it really is changing the playing field, I think. And I want to think about that in terms of your business, though. I mean, you've built a successful business largely through referrals.
Mhm.
And to me, that usually signals that something is actually working. So, what are you doing differently in your client organizations? Thinking about my audience, HR leaders. What are you doing differently when it comes to developing people?
I think what we do is we're really good at getting, because we're using a multiple assessment instruments and they're validated, we get a really granular understanding of what I call behavioral mechanisms of action. And unlike, a strength finders will.
A behavioral MOA. That's great. I love that.
Yeah, 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 I knew.
I
See,
love that.
you appreciate it because you get both sides of it, the biopharma thinking on that, right? But if you think about it, things like a strength finders or Myers-Briggs will tell you what you're observing, basically, right? They'll give you attributes of behavior, but they don't tell you why. So if I have somebody that's an aggressive personality, like the woman I was describing to you, we look at genetic traits. If you're high energy, you move through life fast, you're high dominance, you have a big ego, you like to control situations, you're highly disciplined, you set goals high and you hold people to very high standards, maybe even unrealistic standards, and you're highly competitive, you're what's called an aggressive competitor. You can be a nice person, but you're intense. I mean, you're coming through the door, you're all guns blazing right now. If you're in a battle, having those types of people can be helpful, but they're going to also alienate a faction of people. Look at a guy like Trump's a great example. He alienates a lot of people. Does he get things right? Yeah, he does. But he also can frustrate people that even are supportive of his policies because of some of the rhetoric and things he says and how outlandish he can be. That's that competitive dominant that he can't restrain himself, and he's never been penalized for not restraining himself. He became president of the United States twice being that way. So how do you tell the guy he's wrong, that it registers in a way that he's going to manage those severe components of his behavior? So by understanding the severity and intensity with which one shows up, we can help them with things like learned behavior, like social skills and goodwill. So one of the examples, you'll appreciate this, Mike. If I said to you, look, do you like people that are big egos, they're always right, and they have to win? Do you like people like that?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. I love people with who are goal oriented.
Okay. A lot of people, like 8 out of 10, if I say that in a meeting, they'll say, no, I don't like people with big
Of
egos who are
course.
know-it-alls and they're always right and they have to win. And I invariably say, well, so you don't like me because I'm high dominance, high expertise, high competing. I'm that profile. And they'll like, well, no, it's different. I like you. And I'll say, well, what is it that thing about me that makes me likable? And they don't know. They're like, I don't know. I don't know that you don't present as having a big ego. I'm like, no, I do. I think it's pretty obvious. The difference is learned behaviors. I call it social acuity, which is the number one
Well,
factor in high performance. Go
so
ahead.
let's explore that, Curtis, because so much of leadership development focuses on skills, frameworks, tools. And at some point, or at what point, does that stop translating into real performance? What's missing?
I think if you look, Google studied high performance individuals and teams. They published on this, right? In 2017 is when they first published on this. I term it social acuity, the ability to connect to you, Mike, find a connection, a genuine connection, and to show genuine care and compassion. So I think what's missing from many of these programs, I'm dealing with a lot of technical teams now. I worked with a manufacturing team for one of my clients this week. No one had skills above a 30, not one person on the leadership team. Are they good people? And as a matter of fact, there was one person with a 0, a 1, a 2, and a 3 for social skills. And what that means is, if you look at people that have very, very single digits for social skills, they typically build really deep relationships with a couple people. They're married for 40 years. They're attached at the hip to their spouse. They go everywhere with them. They do everything with them, right? They have 1 or 2 friends that they've had since high school. They don't belong to a lot of clubs or do a lot of stuff, right? They have deep, deep, strong relationships. It's not measuring quality of relationships, it's how they scale it. But if I'm a 1 for social skills, I could work at a plant for 30 years and not know 90% of the people in the plant. If I don't have to directly work with them, I might pass you every day in the hallway and not even know your name. And so We don't emphasize, I think, at a young age. We should be teaching kids this, that I believe as AI becomes more important and things become automated, the ability for two human beings like you and I to connect, to be able to discuss the data and information presented to us, and to make good decisions as to what to do with that knowledge becomes an imperative. We're in that transition now where people are trying to automate, and they're not putting enough emphasis on the quality of the leaders that will dictate what these machines and AI systems do.
Well, it's so true. And really, as I think about this show, I mean, the people dividend, there's really, at the core of it is a very simple idea that people drive performance. But most organizations still treat development as a support function. So, in your experience, I mean, what do leaders misunderstand about how people actually drive these results? I get what you're saying. A lot of the brilliant people I worked with or continue to work with, they fit that profile that you describe. They know very few people outside of a small circle of colleagues with whom they've developed deep relationships. They're not willing, and yet they tend to be some of the most creative people. But so, how do people actually drive results? I mean, what do leaders misunderstand?
I think I see a couple different things play out. You have organizations that believe that process accountability is enough. If we have a really well-defined process, we set expectations and we make people accountable, that I really don't care about the behavioral assessment and whether Mike's stressed or not. They just don't care. They're like, Mike has a job, we pay him a lot to do it. And I think there's a lot of companies that feel that that's a more efficient way to deal with it. I think there are a number of leaders that understand developing the team is important, but they're not going to jeopardize their job over it. I mean, Mike, I have a lot of HR teams where they don't really understand how to build leaders. They're implementing programs because they're checking the box. Yes, we have a leadership program. It's comprised of this instrument, and they check the box. We completed it. Where I always say to my CEOs or my whoever's our champion, we need to move the needle on performance. I mean, we need to see that the work we're doing on the behavioral side is translating into teams that are faster, more effective. They're getting beyond expectation of what people thought they may be capable of. That doesn't always mean they're selling more, but maybe what they're doing is they're just staving off. I've got manufacturing where they can't get raw material because they're single source products, and there's war going on all over the world now. So all of a sudden, one of their manufacturers can't ship, or the stuff's sitting on a ship, in the Straits of Hormuz, and they can't get it through that stuff's happening daily. And these teams figure out, well, okay, let's just take a deep breath and figure out how we're going to solve this problem. And so I think there are just people that will. Then you get those leaders that no matter what the company says, they're like, Kurt, we're going to bring you in. We're going to build a team, and I'll ask for forgiveness later. Like I don't care that
Yeah.
my boss is telling me we're not spending money on this. I'm getting paid to make things happen, and I'm going to invest in the team. And those are the really special leaders. They're the ones that I think they're always putting up results because they're always making sure people are practicing the finer parts of the game, so to speak.
Yeah. So, for the leaders who are listening to today's episode, what's one shift they can make immediately that would improve how their teams perform, Kurt? What's that one shift?
You're going to laugh. Make sure their team members sleep 8 hours a night. I'm dead serious.
My response is usually say hello to each other. It's also a very simple technology.
Yeah, I can't tell you, and I talked to you a little bit about this, and we didn't really discuss it, but teams right now, I'm seeing excessive levels of stress, low confidence, and a lot of it is in part a result of the fact that these people are just not sleeping. They're stressed and they can't sleep. If you're not getting 8 hours of sleep a night, you're cognitively and physically impaired. So, the number one thing I tell all the leaders I work with, if I do nothing more than convince your team to sleep more, you won. Whether they do the behavioral stuff or not, literally just getting people more rested, and your brain reboots when you sleep. There's a whole biological thing that happens when people sleep. And so I I've worked with 3 teams this week. Out of those 3 teams, let's see, it's, what, 12, 6, 38 people. 1 person out of those 38 sleeps 8 hours a night. 1 out of 38. So, sleep more, and then the other thing I would say, um, there's only 2 things that you and I can control today. The relationship you and I have, social skills and goodwill. Did we connect? Do we like each other? And then how did we navigate the topic? And so I look at it, there's only 3 outcomes. You either like me, dislike me, or you'll forget about me. And you feel that this was, I look at it this way. When you reflect on this podcast, in all the ones that you've ever done, where does this rate? Is it one of the better ones? Is it average? Was it boring? Is it one that people will tune out of? I'm striving for the former. That you say, hey, pretty good guy, and that was a pretty good conversation. And I don't think people look at every interaction that way, and I think they should.
That's great. And it's one of the reasons why I really appreciate this conversation today with you, Curtis. And last question, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So Shauna at eurekaconnect.com is my assistant, and Shauna controls all the scheduling. So if anybody wants to talk to me, just reach out to Shauna, Shana at eurekaconnect.com, and she'll get you on my schedule. Happy to talk to you about what we do, how we do it. A lot of CEOs, I'll tell them it's free. You can go through the assessment on me. And if you like it, you pay for it, and we'll talk about something we can do with your team. And if you don't like it, it's on me. If I can't prove to you what we do is impactful and beneficial, then you shouldn't hire us. And then we didn't talk about the Institute for Biomedical Entrepreneurship, but ibeinc.org, eurekaconnect.com is the behavioral, but the IBE is a 5-day course on translation. And we've now helped to advance over 500 companies since 2017. These were academics that had ideas. Some of them have exited already in that period of time. And we've got, I've personally founded 5 companies last year, 3 device companies and 2 therapeutics. So very proud that one of the therapeutic companies already doing their phase 1 studies.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Well, Curtis, thank you so much. I mean, it's been great to have you as a guest on the People Dividend. And this is the People Dividend. So if you're serious about performance, start with people. And until the next episode, everyone, stay well.